Over Labor Day weekend, I took a trip to my favorite part of the Sierras, Inyo National Forest and Yosemite. I was excited for a weekend of fresh mountain air and cool temperatures, but what I arrived to was anything but. About 2 hours into our drive, a thick orange haze enveloped the mountains ahead of us. Immediately, I knew it was wildfire smoke, and I was transported back to my dreadful escape of Southern Oregon last year, when I was forced to travel through an active wildfire area to get home.
Oh, we're in actual smoke now.
Yeah.
It's permeating.
We're gonna die! I smell it.
I turned it off.
I know. It's a little hazardous smoke breathing in.
We're not constantly exposed to it.
I could feel the heat of the fire through the car windows and even see the flames in places. The smoke created a thick blanket that blocked out the sun for hours, and ash rained down from above like snow. We're in the wildfire zone right now, and the sky looks really crazy. There's just like a big plume of smoke just hanging right there. That's all smoke. And there's a little ash falling out of the sky. And I have a headache because we were driving through really, really thick smoke. I hope this time we weren't driving into something similar. There was no service for most of the drive and no air monitoring stations in this section of the state. So there was no telling how expansive the plume of smoke was, or where it was coming from. I kept my fingers crossed that we would reach the other side of the cloud, but it only became thicker and the scent of campfire filled the car, forcing us to turn off the AC and to close the vents. The car was fairly quiet as we dreaded what we were going to find when we got to our destination, and if our weekend trip would be canceled and ruined. When we approached Mono Lake, my optimism dwindled and alarm grew. Mono Lake and the mountains that surround it, which typically can be seen from several miles away, was masked by the opaque grayish-orange curtain. We had plans to camp that night, but with the air quality index being well above hazardous, it would have not been safe. So we stayed at a hotel for that night and hoped that the smoke would magically disappear the next morning. Despite the smoke being inconvenient and unsafe for humans, it actually serves an important purpose in nature. As we travel through Yosemite and Inyo National Forest, we will explore that important purpose and how it has been compromised by human intervention. Fire is as intrinsic to the Sierras as rain is to the Amazon. As a human trying to escape the suffocating smoke, it is hard to imagine anything can thrive, let alone live in such a hostile environment. But the largest trees in the world, the sequoia, have managed to for thousands of years. Yosemite has 3 main groves: Mariposa, Tuolumne, and Merced. On our way into Yosemite Valley, we stopped at the Tuolumne Meadows, where there are about 24 mature sequoias and several that have fallen. It's almost impossible to understand the size of these giants until you crawl through one. I'm afraid there's gonna be spiders. Wow, you really can go deep in there. I'm having to, crab walk. Ah! Oh wait, that's just a hair. It's just a hair, it's just someone's hair. It's not a spider web. You might assume that a huge tree comes with huge cones, but you'd be wrong. It's an odd dichotomy that the sequoia cone, which holds its seeds, is actually very tiny. I noticed many signs that fire had ripped through this grove at one time, But most of the sequoias remain virtually untouched. How? Fire, what we so often fear, was once the sacred ally of the sequoia. Low-burning fires, often sparked by lightning, move gently through these ancient forests, not to destroy, but to renew. The heat causes their cones to open, coaxing seeds to fall in a phenomenon called serotiny. Fire clears the underbrush, allowing the soil to be exposed to sunlight so seeds and saplings can take root and grow. The sequoias, protected by their thick 5-layer bark and towering branches, rarely die from wildfires. The outer bark of the tree is uniquely adapted to withstand low-burning fires and is actually renewed from within, meaning that sequoias can in essence heal from burns, kind of like how humans can, depending on the degree of burn, of course. Fire scars in sequoia tree rings date back 2,000 years and show that widespread fires occurred naturally at intervals ranging between 6 to 35 years. Native Americans understood the usefulness of these naturally occurring wildfires and used them intentionally for thousands of years to improve landscape for hunting, grazing, and living. Their practices helped maintain open and healthy forests and prevented the buildup of ladder fuels, which allow fires to climb into the massive sequoia canopies. When settlers came unfamiliar with the territory and the role fire played in the forest's inception and expansion, they would change these forests forever, and the sequoias became collateral damage. To them, fire meant danger, loss, something to conquer. In the 19th century, U.S. federal and state policies banned the indigenous practice of cultural burning, which was deemed destructive. And so, for over 100 years, fire was banished, snuffed out wherever it sparked. The policy of fire suppression created an abnormal and dangerous fire regimen by allowing excess vegetation to build up. The consequences have been catastrophic. Without fire's cleansing touch, the forest grew heavy. Dead branches, crowded saplings, fuels piled high, waiting for ignition. The natural balance had been broken, and the logging of sequoias starting in the late 1800s only seemed to make things worse. Thousands of sequoias were cut down by logging companies, but only a fraction of the wood actually made it to the mill. The logging companies found the sequoia wood to be surprisingly brittle, and many times when a big sequoia would fall, it smashed into unusable pieces. Estimates from the 1930s suggest that more than half of the wood was left on the ground because it was simply not worth picking up. Despite the incredible waste, logging companies had sunk so much money into this operation they had to keep chopping. And the severed husks of the great sequoia trees were left to decay on the forest floor, becoming fodder for the impending flames after their 3,000-year-old journey toward the sky. In the 1970s, scientists began to understand what Native Americans have for generations. Parks like Yosemite and Sequoia began performing prescribed burns, gentle guided flames that mimic the past. But unfortunately, by that time, the damage had been done, not only in the sequoia groves, but across the world. Heavy reliance on and expansion of fossil fuels since the Industrial Revolution has created a situation that the sequoias can't escape from. They have endured fire, ice ages, but can they withstand the effects of a rapidly changing climate? From 2012 to 2016, California endured a drought like no other. Hotter, drier, longer, the trees gasped for water. And for the first time in known history, the giant sequoias began to suffer. Leaves withered, bark beetles, once harmless, invaded the weakened giants. Some trees lost 75% of their canopy in a single season. It was a sign that even giants can fall. Then came the infernos. Between 2015 and 2021, in just 6 years, over 85% of all sequoia groves burned, more than in the entire previous century. An estimated 10,000 ancient sequoias were lost. 3,000-year-old giants, some of which had seen the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, the birth of written language, and the death of Jesus Christ. Gone in days, reduced to ash. A 2021 study supported by NOAA concluded that climate change has been the main driver of the increase in fire weather in the western United States. Research shows that the changes in climate that we are currently seeing create warmer, drier conditions, leading to longer and more active fire seasons. This is because rising global temperatures lead to more frequent and intense heat waves, which dry out vegetation, soil, and forests, adding more fuel to the fire, so to speak. If you have ever made a campfire, you may know that dry wood is the best for making a fire, and a lot of that wood makes it burn high and hot. This is because less energy is wasted on evaporating moisture from the wood, more fuel is available to combust, and the combustion is more efficient, creating the envy of all other campers at the campground. Warmer nighttime temperatures also allow fires to burn through the night, and earlier snowmelt and longer dry seasons also create more flammable fuel and a longer period of time in which that fuel can catch fire. These drivers were found to be responsible for over half of the observed decrease in moisture content of forest fuels in the western US and the doubling of forest fire burned area over a period of 1984 to 2015. Drought and persistent heat set the stage for extraordinary wildfire seasons from 2020 to 2022 across many western states, with all 3 years far surpassing the average of 1.2 million acres burned since 2016. As I'm sure you know, these fires not only impact forests, but people as well. The National Interagency Fire Center reported that the annual cost of federal fire suppression only was this amount. But the toll is far higher. The USGS estimates that wildfire costs $424 billion annually, with damages to critical energy and communication infrastructure, private property, ecosystem services, construction, emergency evacuation, and post-fire rehabilitation. Another major impact of wildfires is on human health through exposure to smoke pollution, which was fairly evident to me when driving through the Sierras this year. Just after an hour or so of driving through the smoke, my throat hurt and I was all congested. It was not fun. In California, the average annual cost of this wildfire smoke exposure was close to $200 million in 2020, and likely more now. While property and health costs of wildfires receive much of the focus, numerous other categories are more difficult to quantify. The controlled burns that the National Park Service, Forest Service, and others do can help to decrease the wildfire's intensity, size, and speed by reducing the buildup of flammable vegetation,
but it's like putting a band-aid over a bullet hole. Overall, the number of extreme wildfires is only increasing in frequency and intensity globally. The true impetus is not so easily stopped. Despite the exorbitant and burdening cost of wildfires environmentally, financially, and physically, industrial interests have taken precedence. Fossil fuel companies, the main contributors of greenhouse gas emissions, have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in 2024 lobbying the government to pass legislation beneficial to them, while also funneling money into think tanks to convince the general public that it's good for us too. According to Open Secrets, in 2024, $153 million was spent by the oil and gas industry alone. One of the big donors was none other than Koch Industries, a company known historically for its flagrant negligence for the environment and disdain for environmental and safety regulations, which have led to countless lawsuits and deaths. So it's no coincidence that recent threats have emerged regarding our public land. The possibility of our public lands being opened and sold off to private entities for mineral exploration, drilling, and logging is a very real existential threat. Just recently, the USDA proposed rescinding the 2001 roadless rule, which was a directive issued by President Clinton virtually ending all logging, road building, coal, gas, oil, and other mineral leasing in 58 million acres of the wildest remaining undeveloped national forest lands. Recently, during its open comment period in September, it received nearly 250,000 comments urging the government to keep the rule in place. This is only one of many attempts to open our public land for resource plundering. Reverting back to relying heavily on fossil fuels instead of exploring renewable energy alternatives and pushing for environmental deregulation will only worsen the issue of climate change and the subsequent financial burdens, natural disasters, and public health effects that come with it. Amidst challenges such as federal budget cuts, lobbying from corporate interest groups, environmental deregulation, and climate science denial, the National Park Service and its allies are not giving up on our precious public land, including the sequoias. The future of the sequoias and the forests that host them is uncertain. Once a natural phenomenon which humans and sequoias live beside, adapted to, and grew with, wildfires in the Sierras have now become exceedingly unnatural, and threats that were once non-existent are rampant. Perhaps at first it was unintentional, spurred by ignorance and necessity, but mounting evidence, some of which was discovered by the fossil fuel companies themselves, now points toward felonious negligence. If we the people don't stand up for our beautiful United States and the world, the future of the sequoia and our forests will undoubtedly burn.